theyeshiva.net.
Thank you so much. Just give me a thumbs up, Reb Shmuel, that you could see me and hear me. Excellent. Thank you, South Africa. Thank you, my dearest friends, Reb Shmuel, Reb Moshe, Reb Aaron, the Arch, the Base. I am once again thrilled and privileged to be here with hundreds and hundreds of dear friends, colleagues, brothers and sisters from the greatest community, the South African Jewish community, whose warmth, hospitality, warmkeit, humanness, sensitivity, and deep sense of Yiddishkeit and community always inspires me and infuses me with such a sense of warmth and delight and, as they say in Yiddish, geschmack. From the day that the corona pandemic broke out, more than 1 year ago, last March, the South African community has really mobilized itself to maintain that sense of community and oneness, even if physically distant, spiritually and emotionally connected, more than ever. And I remember from right away, a few weeks into the corona, when Reb Shmuel phoned me one day and he said, we're going to have more than 1,000 Jews from South Africa coming together to learn. We're going to do this on an ongoing basis, and I want you to be part of it. And I remember that first moment, that first session that we had, and it was incredible to see the hundreds of families, thousands of people that came together on Zoom and the other outlets to learn and grow and connect to each other. And as you said, hundreds of thousands have been touched since. And I commend you guys for a job well done, and most importantly, a job that is continuously being done and going from strength to strength. May you always continue to go from strength to strength to inspire all of us in the whole South African community. I just want to share what a humbling privilege it is for me to be here with you again. I stopped counting how many times we have been together, which is a very good sign. So I'm really thankful for this opportunity, and it's a great tribute to Reb Nosson Nata, Ben Shmuel David, a great tribute to him. May he be an everlasting source of light and blessing and inspiration to the family and to his loved ones and to the entire community and to all of the Jewish people and to the world. The theme today is not an easy theme. It's the theme of faith in times of crisis, obviously coming on the heels, the week of Shiva, for those 45 incredible souls. It's hard not to cry every time you mention them. Those 45 incredible Jewish souls crushed to death in the middle of the night at the wee dawn of Lag BaOmer, Tavshin Pei Aleph, Lag BaOmer 2021, 5781, in that one of the great sacred spaces of the Jewish people in the Holy Land, in Meron, at the resting place of the Tana of our great sage, one of the greatest sages, mystics, leaders, tzaddikim in our history, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. During the dancing, during the celebrations, during the joy, during the ecstasy and the sense of burning faith and unity that always engulfs the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of Jews who come to Meron annually on or around Lag BaOmer. So the question is faith. How do we cultivate faith in times of such distress and times of crisis? And I know this issue brings up a lot of emotion, a lot of feelings, and a lot of questions. And that's why we especially wanted to open it up to questions and answers. You'll see on your Zoom, there's a Q&A on the bottom. Please feel free to insert your question. There's no taboos. You could bring up whatever is on your heart. First and foremost, whenever there's a crisis, we take comfort in our unity. Just being together, even if we don't have many words of solace and comfort, and even if we don't have many explanations or any explanations, just being together with our brothers and sisters the world over is already meaningful and inspiring. Because as the Talmud says in Yerushalmi, and Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says this in the Medrash in a few places, that all the Jewish people are limbs of one body. The body has 80 trillion cells, and every cell has its own functionality and purpose. And there's so many limbs and organs and bones and sinews and tissue and white bloods and blood cells and neurons. The body is a miracle, a divine miracle of engineering. But the diversity, the miracle of the biodiversity in our organisms is only magnified by the fact that they're all integrated into an organic, unified, integrated whole. It's that combination of diversity that comes together with unity, that every limb has its own story to tell, it has its own individual function, design, chemistry, and purpose, and yet it recognizes itself as part of a larger story called the story of life, the story of a living organism. That is the miracle of life. And that's the miracle of the Jewish people. Every one of us is an individual. You have your personality and your idiosyncrasies, and I have mine. Each of us has our own shtick and our own mishigasin. Maybe not you guys, I'm speaking about myself. Do they have any mishigasin in South Africa, Reb Shmuel? Any idiosyncrasies? Okay. And each one of us has our own contribution to make, our own story to tell, our own music to play. Every one of us is an indispensable note in God's cosmic symphony, but we are all notes of a singular symphony. We are all part of one larger story. As Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, whose yahrzeit is on Lag BaOmer, the reason for which all those special Jews came to Lag BaOmer, to dance and unite and celebrate and sing and dance around the fires of Lag BaOmer, he writes that Kol Yisrael keguf echad uchenefesh achas, one body and one soul. And body has to keep together and a soul has to keep together, even if there's differences of opinion. And even if there are different perspectives, and let's face it, in every Jewish community, we are comprised of people from one extreme to another extreme. And we argue about everything. We argue about politics, and we argue about religion, and we argue about Israel, and we argue about the Jewish past and the Jewish future, and we argue about customs and traditions and faith and Jewish law and everything else. I once heard from Elie Wiesel, the late Elie Wiesel, who once said, Jews love arguing with each other. He says, we have been doing it from the beginning of time. We're a sophisticated people, so we give our arguments sophisticated names. He says, but we love a fight. We love a verbal fight. He says, we fight with the world. And we have a name for it. We call it sociology. Then we fight with God. And we have a name for it. We call it theology. Then we start fighting with ourselves, and we call it psychology. Yes, but the call of the hour is uninhibited Ahavas Yisrael and Achdas Yisrael. Love and unity to the extreme. And as Rav Kook, the great Rabbi Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, the first chief rabbi of what was then called Palestine, said that the Talmud says in Yuma that the destruction came because of baseless hatred. The rebuilding will come because of baseless love. This is the call of the hour. Once and for all, we have to get rid of our fragmentations. I may disagree with you, but I have to be here for you. You may disagree with me, but we have to be here for each other, support each other. My limbs and my body can be very different, but we are part of one story. We always have to communicate with each other, love each other, be here for each other, trust each other, and support each other. And the South African community gets a lot of credit. I have to say this every visit that I had in South Africa. I saw this. It's a community and diverse like any other community, and I'm sure there's plenty of arguments in South Africa as well. You guys are opinionated people, I know, as all Jews are. And the Jews, South Africa, no exception. But you manage to understand that family comes first, and we are family. You manage to understand that blood is thicker than water. And we have to transcend those things that separate us and realize that what unites us is always far deeper, far more organic, far more real, far more authentic than that which divides us, even if there are things that divide us. And that must trump everything else. And even if there's disagreements, we have to continue to communicate and listen to each other, Shema Yisrael. And I hope you continue to serve as an example of that. And that's why so many great projects came out of South Africa. Because if it would happen in New York, If he says this, the other person has to say the opposite. We have to learn from you. And this is such a time of pain and agony that the first and foremost call is always for unity, not just in times of crisis and catastrophe and pain, but during blissful days and nice days and calm days, to be able to hold on to that truth, one of the greatest truths of history, and that's the unity of the Jewish people. Reb Shimon ben Yochai once said, when one Jew is beaten, this is Midrash Vayikra, chapter 4, when one Jew is beaten, every other Jew feels it. Not everybody here knows who died in Meron. You may have not know the family, you may not even know the community. But everyone is walking around this week reeling from pain with lumps in their throats. Everyone is devastated and sad, crying, because they're not strangers. Because if we haven't figured it out yet after a few thousand years, we are really one. We are indivisible. The Tanya writes, the Nefesh HaChaim writes, it's based on the Talmud, that all Jewish souls are one. It's one soul that comes into different bodies, but it's really one organic, larger organism. In science, they call ant colonies superorganisms. We are a superorganism, and if I'm fighting with you, I'm not fighting with you, I'm fighting with me. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, because it is kamocha. So first and foremost, it's comforting just to be together, to be able to lean on each other, to be able to see each other, to be able to support each other, to be able to cry with each other. That's first and foremost. And before I continue, I see that there's already a few questions, so I'm going to read the questions. So the computer is a little far from me, so let me read it. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger. Okay, then I'm going to continue. When one tries to accept that there are no coincidences, it becomes so painful. Okay, that's very true. Why, on such an auspicious day of Lag BaOmer, did God create such a tragedy? Powerful question. For such a tragedy to occur, when the people were actually doing a mitzvah, they were celebrating such a beautiful occasion, it feels like there's a message. What is it? How would Reb Shimon ben Yochai relate to the current political turmoil in Israel? And one last question before I move on. Is there such a thing? Such a thing happened. What am I supposed to go home with? Does anybody know? What's the message? What do you think, Rabbi? Okay, great questions. Great questions. You could continue writing your questions, and I'm going to stop again to take questions, either in middle or later. So feel free to continue to ask your questions. I'm going to address some of these questions to the best of my ability during the following remarks. I want to share with you a story that happened a few years ago, and I think it captures something very authentic about Jewish faith. Okay. And I contrast that with a story that just happened this week. The story I want to share with you happens in Antwerp a few years ago. There was a Jew there known, a great tzaddik known as Rabbi, the Pshevorski Rebbe, the Rebbe of Pshevorsk. His father was Rabbi Yankele, he's Reb Leibish, and a number of years ago he was sitting Shiva. Unfortunately, he lost a daughter, and people came to visit him and try to console a bereaved father. And one of the visitors tells Reb Leibish, the Pshevorski Rebbe, he says, I want to share with you a story. And he tells him a story about the great Rebbe of Tzanz, the Divrei Chaim. His name was Reb Chaim Halberstam. He passed away in the 1870s, 1876, I believe. One of the great Hasidic masters of Poland. Many dynasties came from Reb Chaim Tzanz or Reb Chaim Halberstam, known as the Divrei Chaim. He lost a child by the name of Reb Meir Nosson. It was Friday afternoon when they buried this boy right before Shabbos. And the Divrei Chaim came home for Shabbos, and all of Shabbos, he seemed in his regular upbeat mood, spirited, exhilarated, Shabbos was such a special day for him, full of joy and ecstasy and spiritual awakening and inspiration. He followed his regular traditions and customs, the tish that he made for his chassidim, his disciples and his followers, and the singing and the dancing, as though nothing happened. Somebody asked him, how did you not get overwhelmed from grief, from the tragedy, from the sadness? I know it was Shabbos, but you're human. And the Tzanz Eruv, the holy Rav of Tzanz, responds and says, you're walking in the street, and somebody comes over to you and gives you a strong zetz, as they call it, a zetz on your back. One of those zetzes you ever got a clap, pounds your back, like a punch in your back. And your initial reaction is, who's this terrorist? Who's this thug? Who's this monster? I'm going to punch him in the nose. I'm going to run away. I'm going to call the police. He says, then you turn around and you see it's your best friend. And you can't help but break out in a smile. But why are you smiling? That's hurt. Because it was your best friend and he meant well. He was just trying to tell you, I'm here with you. I love you. And the Tzanz Rebbe said, I got a zetz. I got a terrible zetz. And it hurts badly. But then when I opened my eyes, I realized it was my best friend. It was somebody who loves me infinitely and unconditionally. So therefore I could smile on Shabbos. This is what a Jew in Antwerp is telling the Pshevarsky Rebbe Reb Leibish during the Shiva of his daughter. And I want to tell you what the Pshevarsky Rebbe's response was. And I'm going to say it in the original Yiddish, and then I'll translate. He says, Und wie is wenn der Freund stecht rein a Messer in Ricken? And what happens if this best friend didn't slap you on your back, but he took a knife and he shoved it into your back? Do you also smile? This was his response. It captures such an authentic reality that faith does not mean that there is no pain. Faith does not exclude the reality of profound devastation and sadness and deep grief and tears. And I want to tell you something. This past Shabbos afternoon, I went to visit a family that has lost its son in Meron, a 21-year-old boy, a student of the Mir Yeshiva in Jerusalem. Somebody special, a special boy, the epitome of celebration of life. He knew how to suck the marrow out of life, and he was crushed to death. 6'4". Kid was 6'4". But the crush, he couldn't breathe. He passed away. And I went to visit the family for Shalosh Seudos, for the third meal, the mother and the father and the siblings. And the father tells me that he heard about his son's death on Friday. The funeral did not happen yet. The funeral would only happen Sunday, and they would fly Motzei Shabbos to Israel to be at their child's funeral. And he says, I went to daven here in the shul near where I live. He came here for Shabbos. I went to daven in the shul for Ma'ariv, for Kabbalah Shabbos. And I realized that this Shabbos is going to be such a Shabbos of grief. But it's Shabbos. It's Shabbos. So he said, I decided I'm going to be the cantor. I'm going to go to the Amid and be the cantor so I could sing and dance and lead the services. He says, later I realized I should have asked a question. Was it right? Was it wrong? Maybe I should have not. He said, but I went. And he said, and at many points in davening, I had to contain myself from just breaking out in sobs. But I sang and I danced. And I was sitting there listening to him. And I was in awe. That exceptional synthesis that the Jewish people have. that they know how to cry and sob and feel all of those natural emotions of pain and devastation. And yet the same father is telling me, it's Shabbos, and I realize that I also have to dance and sing. And then I get a clip a few days ago from that special father, Rabbi El-Chadad. Did you see? Moshe Yosef El-Chadad, a Breslov chassid. You could see on his face that he's a holy Jew. You know, sometimes you see on a person's face there's a halo of light that envelops them. You could see on him he's a holy Jew. And he lost 2 boys. He lost 2 sons in Meron. He came with 5, and he left with 3. 2 of them died. They buried the boys in Meron, close to the resting place of Shimon Bar Yochai. This was one of the 2 families that lost 2 children. And the father speaks up, and the father says, all night I was praying to God for one thing. Please, whatever happens, don't take away my faith. Don't take away my emunah. During this crisis, don't take away my relationship with you. Don't deprive me from my connection with you, whatever happens. And the father starts crying and he says, and I want to tell you that God fulfilled my prayers. I did not lose my emunah. I did not lose my faith. He says, with all the terrible pain, I still have it. I'm listening to this father, and I'm like, it's like how the students of the Baal Shem Tov used to speak. The greatest tzaddikim of your holy people that we read about in our books that I, when I was a child, I would read all these biographies about the tzaddikim throughout the generations. Like, that's how they spoke. And these are Jews living in 2021 in our midst. Jews, you see them walking in the street. It's just incredible what type of people we belong to. You know, my wife showed me the clip and she starts crying. She says, das is Ayid. You know, this is a Jew. This is a Jew. What else do you need to understand what a Jew is? Jews are humans. Has the Jew not eyes? When you prick us, we don't bleed, as in Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. We have the same heart and the same eyes and the same feelings, the same relationships. It's in such an acute and powerful way. But faith for the Jewish people doesn't mean there's no crisis. Faith is not a form of naivete and escapism and something that just gives easy, smooth answers for everything and makes life comfortable under all situations. Faith takes courage. Faith is the ability to hold on and to trust in life and in meaning and in purpose and in destiny and in love, even when we have no answers. Faith is not just an easy answer for difficult questions. Faith is the ability to hold on at a time when I have no answers. Faith doesn't answer the question. Faith tells me that there are realities that transcend logic, that transcend the finite brain of a human being. Emunah, faith, is the deep awareness that the reality of the Creator is infinite. He transcends matter, He transcends space, He transcends time, He transcends any description, any definition, and He transcends seichel. He transcends logic. In fact, logic is created by God. And there's no way that the creation can capture the Creator. We don't expect a child to understand an adult. Did you ever see a 2 or 3-year-old understand an adult? Do you ever expect your 3-year-old to understand you or your husband's or your wife's decisions? They're not supposed to. That's why they're children. Even though in a few years they will be adults and they may be much wiser than their parents, hopefully. You don't expect a 4-year-old to understand a lecture of a nuclear physicist on nuclear physics, even though in a few years he may be a great physicist and grow beyond the scientist giving the lecture. How then do I expect a finite brain of a finite mortal human being to grasp and comprehend the mind, the perspective, the vision of the Creator who is infinite the author of logic, the author of reality, the author of consciousness, who infinitely transcends it. Faith is the sobering awareness that reality transcends my understanding of it, that there are some mysteries of life that I cannot wrap my brain around. And for me to say, I know why and I understand why and I get it, is foolish and sometimes cruel and ludicrous. For me to say, I know why it happened, I understand why it happened, it's above my pay grade, it's above our pay grade. And it's the acknowledgement that I can hold on to Hashem. I could trust Hashem, even when it's so painful, and even when it's inexplicable, and even when it's unfathomable, and even when it's incomprehensible. You know, I heard from my brother, Rabbi Simon Jacobson. We had, my father was very close with Eli Wiesel. They were very close friends because they worked together as Jewish journalists for many years. So Wiesel would come to my home and he would come to our simchas and conversely. And my brother told me that he once asked Eli Wiesel, is it true that in Auschwitz and Buchenwald, Jews would sing Ani Mamin, I believe? And Wiesel said that in the barracks, he said he wasn't in the gas chambers, but in the barracks, you can hear a Jew sing Ani Mamin, you can hear a Jew sing Lechadoidi, you can hear Jews sing other songs. And my brother said, but how? How did people who were deprived from everything, how can they sing such songs? How can they say, Ani Mamin, I believe? Were they not angry at God? And Wiesel told him something very powerful. He said that this was the protest of the Jewish people against the Germans. That even if you took our loved ones and you destroyed our bodies, you will not destroy our core. You will not destroy our souls. You will not destroy our history. You will not destroy our faith, our tradition, our heritage, our future. You will not destroy the neshama of the Jewish people. You will not destroy Klal Yisrael. This was our way, our only way of protesting the horrors, the evils. It didn't come because we were naive. On the contrary, it came from our deepest sense of fortitude and resilience and faith. It came from the recognition that im kol zeh ani mamin, after everything, because I realized that ultimately I cannot fit God and reality into my box, into my brain, into my mind. I have to be able to be vulnerable and acknowledge the futility of my intellectual capacity in the presence of such surreal events that really make no sense and just make us feel often so vulnerable, so helpless, and sometimes so angry and so upset. There is an incredible insight that was once shared by the Vilna Gaon. Again, I'm going to invite whoever wishes, you could put your questions into question and answer. You see, question and answer, you could put it in, and I'm going to get to it soon, bli neder. There's an incredible insight by the Vilna Gaon. He commented on a poem that we recite on Yom Kippur. During the services of Musaf, we tell the story of the 10 martyrs of Rome. You remember that story? Rabbi Akiva, who was tortured to death with 9 of the greatest sages of the era. Rabbi Yishmael, the high priest, and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the spiritual leader of the Jewish people. Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Chanina ben Tradian, who was burnt with a Torah scroll. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Damar, Rabbi Elazar ben Shmuel, some of the greatest sages of the Jewish people. Asara Haruge Malchus. And we speak about them. And in one of the poems that we recite on Yom Kippur, we tell the story of the angels who turn to God. And they say, God, zu Torah v'zu schara? Is this Torah and is this the reward for Torah? And the Talmud says in Menachos, page 29, that when Moses saw in the future that Rabbi Akiva would be tortured to death by the Romans, he told God, how can you do this to Rabbi Akiva? And God tells him, shtoik, be quiet. Kach ola b'machshava lefanai. This is what ascended in my thought. Why do you have to tell him shtoik, be quiet? Just tell it, Moshe, this is my plan. This is my thought. This is my desire. This is my way of running the world. Why do you have to say, be quiet, shtoik? Just say, kach ola b'machshava. That's the question in the Talmud in Menachos. But now in the prayers of Yom Kippur, God tells the angels, if you say one more word, I'm going to revert the world back to nothingness and chaos and naught, just as it was pre-creation. Come on. They're asking a good question. God, just tell them. You don't want to tell them. Just say, when you get older, you'll understand. Or, I don't want to tell you. Or, it's none of your business. Or, you don't understand the ways of God. Okay. Why threaten them that if they say another word, you're going to destroy the world? You don't have to do that. I mean, if I could be a little humorous about it, if a guy comes home and he makes some ridiculous decision for the family and his wife asks him a question, why are you doing this? And he says, one more word and I'm going to put this whole house on fire. You're going to say, this guy needs a lot of anger management therapy. Come on. The angels asked God a good question. Why are you doing this? Why are you allowing such evil and suffering in the world? Now, God can say, you don't understand. Fine. But why tell them another word? I'm destroying the world. Okay, thank you. That's a great answer, Hashem. And the Vilna Gaon presented a very keen insight. And this is what he said. He said there was once a Jewish tailor who was skilled at his trade. And the king gave him the most expensive silk, Italian silk fabric, to weave for him a most exquisite garment. And the Jewish tailor did so. And he delivered it to the monarch, who was so dazzled and impressed by its brilliance. But there's always an anti-Semitic bishop in every story, right? And the bishop says, I am suspicious that this Jewish tailor stole some of the fabric for himself, which would be an act of treason. And indeed, they measured the garment, they measured the fabric. The two did not match. The Jew must have stolen some of this fabric. An explicit act of treason. He was thrown into the dungeon. And after the trial, and a horrible verdict, he was granted his last wish. An act of treason deserves the death penalty, but there's a last wish. And the last wish of the Jew was, in the presence of the king, bring me the garment that I have woven for the king. And they brought the garment, and the Jew asks for a scissor. And they bring a scissor. This is his last wish. What do you want to do? The Jew says, I want to cut the garment. No, why are you doing that? What's the benefit? He says, because I did not steal even 1 centimeter of the fabric. He says, but we have measured the two and they don't match. He says, for me to prove my innocence, I need to remove every single strand. I need to remove every single thread. I need to undo this entire garment thread by thread by thread until it is in its original state the way it was when I received it. And then you could see that every single thread, every single inch of silk can be accounted for. The angels come to God and say, why? Why are you doing this? And Hashem says, if you really want to know, I'm going to revert the world to nothingness. If I undo every single part of the garment and I remove every single string and strand and thread and I go back to the beginning of time, then you'll see that every single experience, every single encounter, every single moment had meaning and purpose. Every single event from the beginning of time until Mashiach had in it some sacred love, some meaning, some purpose. But for this, I have to undo everything. You came in the middle of the 8th inning. Do you expect to understand the beginning of the game? You're reading 1 chapter of the book. There's 1,000 pages before, there's 1,000 pages afterwards, and you expect to understand everything from the scene that you're observing in the book or in the movie? Were you there in the beginning? Are you there at the end? If you want to really understand, come back with me to the beginning of history, to pre-creation. Let's go pre-creation. Let's go to what's called a place of ayin, of nothingness or no thingness. Pre-Big Bang. Pre-logic, pre-time, pre-space. You'll see everything is accounted for. And that's why God tells Moses, shtoik, be quiet. What he's trying to say is that words cannot capture reality. By definition, words limit reality. Moses, the Torah says Moses, kvat pek, he couldn't speak. Why couldn't Moshe speak? So the Maharal of Prague, the Balatanya both explain. Because Moses' soul was rooted in the world of no thingness. Words are containers. Words are limited containers. They take infinity and they describe it. They define it. They give it a name. They give it a label. That's the power of words. That's why we could communicate with each other and build our world. But that's also the trap of words. They tell stories and describe things and therefore limit them. But certain experiences of life come from the world of infinity. They come from a higher reality. There's no way that you can approach them with words. You can only approach them with silence. Shtoik, with silence. That's why Aaron, after the death of both of his sons, in the midst of the great joyous day of the dedication of the tabernacle, and both of his sons are taken in the middle of the dancing, just like what happened at Lag Bomer. The two priests, Nadav and Avihu, the holiest Jews, Moses said they're holier than you and I. Vayidom Aaron. Aaron was silent. Why the silence? What was the silence about? Because some experiences, some relationships cannot be experienced through words. They're rooted in a space of infinity that completely transcends my logic. And for me to be present there without falling apart, holding on to my trust and meaning and purpose, I have to cultivate the art of silence, which is basically saying, I can't wrap my brain around this. I can't fit this into my logical constructs. I cannot fit this into my mathematical equations. This is not going to be compressed in my 3-pound jello called the brain. It cannot. The only way I can approach it is with absolute silence, which allows me to be fully present. Fully show up to the pain, to the devastation, to the unfathomable quality, and yet say, Im kolzani mamen, I'm still going to hold on to you. I'm still going to believe that there's meaning, that there's purpose, that there's love, even if I don't understand why. Even as the Pshevarsky Rebbe says, I'm not just feeling a bang, a zetz on my back, I'm feeling a knife that went into my back. My dearest friends, I once heard a shir class from Reb Moshe Shapiro, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, and he said at the end of the Kaddish, we say, La'ela min kol birchasa v'shirasa, tush b'chasa v'nechemasa da'amiram ba'olma v'imru amen. You remember? He is blessed, la'ela, above all the blessings. Min kol berchasa, shirasa, above all the songs. Tush bechasa, above all the praises. That we can say, his praise is above it, but then we add v'nechamasa. He's also above all the comfort. Nechamasa means nechama, comfort, hamakom yenachem. That we speak about in the world, the Meron ba'olma, he's above it. What does that mean? I understand he's above all the praises, all the blessings, all the songs, all the hymns, all the poems. Don't capture infinity. What does it mean he's above all the nechamais? And the answer is because there are two types of comforts. There is the comfort where I come to you and I say, I know that you went through a hard time, but I want to show you the silver lining and I want to show you the positive side and I want you to be focused on the good things. And I try to offer you words of comfort and solace, which sometimes is nice. Sometimes these words are nice and even effective. But there comes a moment in life, somebody is standing in front of the grave of a loved one. All those regular words of comfort simply don't add up. No words can capture the magnitude of the pain, and no words can explain and justify and rationalize the pain. And that's when you say, God is la'ela, mikol birchasa v'shirazush b'chasa v'nechemasa. All the comforting words that we're used to, he's above that. The amiram ba'alma, that's articulated in the world. What I need at this moment is a deeper relationship. I have to be able to strip myself from the need to make everything feel good in my brain. I have to be able to open myself up to an infinite reality. I have to be able to surrender everything I know about myself and I know about life and I know about God to a different paradigm, to a different perspective. And it's difficult and it's painful. The alternative is resignation, despair, giving up on life, giving up on meaning. Some people choose that and you could never judge them. But the Jewish response is, I have to tune into a different level of comfort, a different level of nechama that is not rooted in logic. It's rooted in infinity. And when I can open myself up to that, I can find comfort and resilience and strength and fortitude and joy and inspiration, even in inexplicable experiences, which doesn't make it easy. But I don't lose my connection with life and with love and with my soul and with others and with meaning and with Yiddishkeit and with my God. I don't lose my God in the process. I don't lose my faith in the process. And I think at such a moment, I certainly cannot say why, what, when, purpose. But I think what we could say is that we are an incredible people. We have been through so much and we're still clinging on to Yiddishkeit and to faith and to God. After thousands of years in exile and triumphing in such an extraordinary way, it's really incomprehensible to understand why Mashiach is not here yet, why the redemption is not here, why is there still suffering. It's overdue. God has done well with the Jewish people when he entered into a marriage with us 3,500 years ago. I don't know if even God, if I could say this a little with humor, tongue-in-cheek, even God imagined what a good shidduch he made, what a loyal spouse he entered into the chuppah with. The Jewish people, ki am kshei oirifu. And in today's day and age, I don't think we should be judging ourselves and knocking ourselves and demonizing ourselves. I do think we should be introspective in the sense of asking ourselves, are we living up to the amazing people that we are? You are so amazing. Are you living up to that? This is the time to really challenge ourselves and open ourselves up to a life of full alignment. Are you aligned? Am I fully aligned with my spiritual essence, with my infinite core? Each and every single one of us is an infinite blessing of the divine in this world. We have proven it, and we have proven it again this week. And our challenge today is, can I let go of my last attachments to a world of smallness, of pettiness, of hatred, of jealousy, of stupidity, of selfishness, of narcissism, of fear, of insecurity, of resentment, of negativity, of toxicity, of animosity? Can I let go of those last connections to my gullus mentality, which keeps me in shackles and exiled, and open ourselves up to the true selves that we are, ambassadors of infinity, ambassadors of redemption? My wife sent me earlier a poem that was written last Thursday by a man named Nesanel Shimon Matlun. He wrote it a few hours before he died in Meron. He put it in an envelope and he gave it to a friend, and he told his friend to open it on Sunday, just a few hours after his funeral. It's an exceptional poem written on the day of his death in Meron. It's written in Hebrew, and I'm seeing it in Hebrew. I'm just going to give you a loose, free translation. It's not accurate word for word. It's just what comes to mind as I read the Hebrew. And this is what Reb Nesanel Shimon Matlun, Zechrona Livracha, writes. He says, instead of being filled with frustration, learn to accept reality with love. Instead of being harsh and rude, learn to be flexible and forgiving. Instead of getting angry and frustrated, allow your mind to rule. Instead of complaining, lamenting, and criticizing, learn to be more grateful. Instead of demonizing everybody and telling us how bad everything is, learn to filter out the toxicity. Instead of drowning in water, learn to say that everything has a heavenly purpose. Instead of accusing the whole world, remember who is greater than everything. Instead of getting cooked up and angry and full of hatred, take a deep breath and stretch. Good advice. Instead of getting depressed, fine-tune your skills of faith. Instead of seeing blackness and darkness everywhere, choose the half of the cup that is full. Instead of submerging in depression, remember that every test allows you to rise higher. Because God may create the circumstances, but you're the one who creates your attitudes. In Hebrew, Hashem kovea et hamatzav va'atat matzav haruach. God creates the circumstances, but you're the one who has to choose what your reactions to those circumstances will be. May we be deserving of calling ourselves the brothers and sisters of these 45 exceptional souls who have lit up the world with so much light and so much music and so much love. May we continue their song for eternity until that great moment when the world becomes filled with love and we experience a real and wholesome ultimate redemption speedily in our days. Thank you so much, my dear friends, brothers and sisters. Let's go to questions and answers. Okay, let me move up my chair a little bit so I can see. Hashem has taken many rabbis during the pandemic. He has taken so many tzaddikim in Meron. We are left bereft of our greatest and our best. Why are our best people dying? Wow, there are those who say that the tragedy of Meron happened because of sinas chinam, because we don't like each other, because there's disunity in Am Yisrael, that Hashem chose these people, these great people, to deliver a message. Do you concur, Rabbi? Moreover, what would you say about this? I know you were a student of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. What would the Lubavitcher Rebbe say about this? Terrible tragedy for everybody. But doesn't God give us the ability to choose? There was supposed to be 10,000 people there, not 100,000 people there. Whew. I'm laughing because these are tough questions. I heard that emunah comes from the word imun, which is a craft, a trade, or going to the gym, training, imunim, exercise. Could you explain the connection? Also, can you say something about reconciling a loving and merciful God with a creator who formulates a person with free choice? In order for good to mean something, we have free choice, so there's good and evil. Is that a kind thing to do? How does a Jew display such faith during such a tragedy? I still don't understand. Why do bad things happen to good people? Okay, there's a lot of more questions, but I'm going to address these and then I'm going to go to the next questions. The person also wants to know, did your brother ask Eli Wiesel why he left Yiddishkeit? So let me make a few comments that I hope can address, at least on some level, the points that are being said here. What I myself heard in the later years from my own Rebbe was, he was very sensitive not to blame the Jewish people and not to judge them. He felt, and I think we all feel, as the Talmud says, as Moshe says, as all the prophets say, but especially in our generation, that the Jewish people are the greatest of the great, the holiest of the holy. You're part of an incredible people. Listen to the clips coming from the parents who have lost children, children who have lost parents, siblings, of their reaction, and you see that you are part of the most incredible, courageous, resilient people filled with love, dedication, faith, unwavering commitment. After 2,000 years of exile and darkness, we have proven ourselves not only to be a strong nation, but with such concealment, still clinging to the Jewish people, to the Torah, to faith, to God. Do we have flaws? Of course we have flaws. Do we have challenges, setbacks? Of course. Do we make mistakes? Of course. We have been 2,000 years in exile. God has concealed his face for 2 millennia. Of course we have flaws and shortcomings. But with all of those flaws, we are an incredible, incredible people. So our focus really has to be today, not on judging the Jewish people and speaking negatively about the Jewish people, but on the contrary, to really realize that because we are an amazing people, we are a people that is aligned with infinity, each and every one of us should ask ourselves, am I living up to the true amazingness? I just made up a word. Am I living up to the true infinite quality of my essence? I want to live a life that's completely aligned with who I am in my deepest place. And who are you in your deepest place? You're a reflection of infinity. You're an ambassador of love, light, and hope. That's the type of introspection we need today. We're so good, we're so powerful, we're so amazing. Let's live up to that power. Let's breathe in that profound holiness that characterizes the Jewish people and express it and live it. Let's cut and sever our connections, our last connections, with a mentality of exile that keeps us trapped, that keeps us stuck in our own paralysis, in our own fears, in our own jealousies, in our own external toxicity. We can really, truly live up to our deepest infinite potential. And yes, the first and foremost thing is unity. Because when you're aware of who you are, who you really are, you're full of love. You're full of positivity. There's no Jew that you hate. Today, we can't afford to hate other Jews. You're too good to have hate. We're too good to have hate. Yes, there are other communities. There are people that make me uncomfortable, maybe. There are people I don't agree with. There are some disagreements. Okay. So that's why I'm not going to talk to my brother because I have a disagreement with my brother. That's why I'm not going to talk to my sister. So I really think we have to extricate all of this from ourselves. But let's do it from a place of positivity and empowerment. Because Mashiach is supposed to be here already. And now we have to tell God, we're ready. We're in a place of redemption. We're not stuck anymore in stupidity and negativity. We're not living anymore in darkness. We're living in a space of infinite light and awareness and consciousness. And now you finally bring the Geula so that fusion can happen. About Elie Wiesel's Yiddishkeit, listen. He went through the Holocaust. He lost a lot of his family. You could read the book Night. He discusses his struggles with God. But I have to tell you that 50 years later, he wrote an article in the New York Times on Rosh Hashanah, the day before Rosh Hashanah. And I think the headline was, "It's time to reconcile." And he writes a letter to God and he said, "I was angry at you because I loved you so much. And I felt that you let me down. But I can't live without you anymore. So let's reconcile." I read that article. And I was like, Ayid, a Jew. But generally, to judge people is not something that I'm comfortable doing because we really don't know about another person's life, especially when you're talking about people who went through Auschwitz. They are in a completely different plane. And I'm always in awe and reverence, full of awe, in the presence of such people who came out and rebuilt and got married and rebuilt families and rebuilt communities. It's the greatest miracle in history from my perspective, even if they had quite a few challenges. Next question. I can accept that I will never understand some of the horrors and tragedies of life. But are we expected to respond in any way? Are we meant to be doing something in response? Great question. Yes, absolutely. We can't understand why, but our question has to be, so what do we do about it? And I think all of us, each one in our own way, needs to energize ourselves more than ever to really live up to our fullest potential as Jews. As I said before, you're amazing. Live up to that. Every single Jew is a living miracle. Every single Jew, as the verse says in Isaiah, we say it before Pirkei Avot, is Neitzer Matoi Ma'aseh Lispar. God says he or she is a branch of my plant, the work of my hands, in which I boast. I boast about them. Isaiah writes, Amzu Yatzarti Liti Lasi Yisaper. God says, I have formed this nation, and their very existence speaks of my existence. The very existence of a Jew points to the existence of a divine supernatural reality, just our existence. And I think today, each of us has to energize ourselves to live up to our truest infinite potential as Jews, which means a life filled with love, a life filled with light, a life filled with hope. Every one of us to be an ambassador of Torah, of mitzvahs, of Yiddishkeit, of love, of hope, of Jewish unity, of Jewish connection, and of all of Torah and of Emunah, each and every one of us in the deepest way. That's the tshuva I think we need today. I think we need the positive tshuva of coming back to our truest and deepest self which exists. Realize who you are, realize your potential, and let you and me and us live up to that infinite potential. Is it okay to feel upset with God? I am his child. I don't understand what he's doing or why. Obviously, I'm limited. I'm finite. I believe that since he's my father, he can deal with my being upset with him. Am I completely wrong? No, I don't think you're completely wrong. I think authentic emotions are very, very precious. Better an ugly truth than a beautiful lie. The Talmud says in Tractate Yuma that Isaiah and Jeremiah would not call God the great one and the awesome one because they saw too much destruction. They knew that the definition of a relationship with God is honesty, and therefore they could not get themselves to lie and say something they don't believe in. The Jerusalem Talmud says God cannot deal with flattery, with chanufa, and real Jews know I'm not going to flatter God just to say the right thing when I'm not feeling it. God was upset at the friends of Job who were justifying and defending and advocating for God and screaming at Job for having all these questions why he's suffering, and they told him, you're wicked and God is just, and God got upset at them much more than Job. Where was their empathy? Where was their understanding? The Talmud says, the Zohar says that Noach sent out a raven from the ark because ravens are known as cruel birds even to their own young. The Zohar says this, Noach was telling God, you remind me of a raven. You were cruel to your children. And the Zohar says, how could Noach say that about God? And the Zohar says, he was in so much pain. God understands. You can't amputate your heart. Like the Pshevarsky Rebbe says, I feel a stab in my back. What am I supposed to say? That it feels like a lollipop and a vanilla ice cream and a milkshake? Of course, there are angels in heaven, there are great souls who could say, the Belzer Rebbe, Reb Aaron, lost his wife and 5 children. He said, I never had a bad day in my life. There are such souls. Reb Zusha of Anipol, he said, I don't know why the Maggid sent somebody to learn how to thank God for bad fortune from Reb Zusha of Anipol. He said, I don't know why he sent you to me. I never had a bad day in my life. He had a lot of suffering. There are people who live in a different plane of reality. But for the human being who feels emotions, yeah, you're feeling angry, you're feeling upset, you're feeling horrible. So we have to appreciate and be mature about the fact that God is not somebody who I could put into my box, that there's an element of faith that transcends my logic. But God is not upset with your authentic emotions. You can share it with him, you can talk about it with him, just like you're talking about it with a best friend or with a therapist. Don't worry. What do you do when you feel really scared about the future and it starts affecting you as a person? What do you do when you're frightened? It's a very, very good question. So sometimes there is a very, very deep fear and you may need somebody to speak to. You may need some supplements in your life, maybe some vitamins, maybe exercise, maybe a certain type of diet. Somebody professional in this area can help you with to be able to alleviate that type of stress and anxiety. Sometimes certain people can use a little medicine or certain vitamins. Speak to a professional because sometimes it's really deep fear. Yeah. But one perspective that I want to share about fear is that it's very important when you wake up in the morning to spend a few minutes, or as much time as you can in meditation and prayer, in really connecting to Hashem, in thanking Him for giving you another day, davening, praying to Him, and really just allowing yourself to meditate on the fact that you're in an eternal relationship with somebody who always loves you and wants the best for you, and who's giving you the courage to be able to live life to the fullest. And that helps us go above the place of fear. Another point is observe your fear and realize that you are not your fear. Those thoughts of fear are inside of you, but they are not you, so you could contain them. You're not defined by them. Those are some things I think you can tell yourself. According to the Zohar, and I recall also from other spiritual works of Hasidus, we don't hate our fellow Jew. We hate their actions, their speech, etc. Yes, this is a great famous chapter 32 in the Tanya, where he says that when the Talmud says that there are certain Jews that you're allowed to hate because they're sinful, it's only talking about people who are on your caliber and you gave them teichecha. Meaning, the Chafetz Chaim writes about this at length. You chastised them, you rebuked them, and it was done in a way that they really understood you, and you could be sure that they are sinning maliciously. And then you're allowed to hate them. But if you're not sure that it's malicious, it may be trauma. They're not bad people trying to do good. Maybe they're sick people or wounded people trying to get healthy. You have no right to hate them, even if they're doing the wrong thing. Because they may not get it. They may not be in a healthy mode. You have to learn not to judge. You have to learn how to really appreciate what people are going through. The Chafetz Chaim says it's very hard to find today somebody who knows how to be meichiach, who knows how to rebuke. And if you don't know how to rebuke, you can't hate. And then the Tanya says, and even if it's a Jew who you know is malicious and he gets it and he's still doing it, there's still a mitzvah to love him. Because there's always a divine soul there to love. And it comes from the Rishon, the Yad Rameh writes that the mitzvah v'ahavta l'recha kamocha is to every single Jew. Even a Jew who does wrong things, there's still a mitzvah to love. There is the negative feeling towards the bad behavior, even if that's justified, which is very rare. But there's always the love because of the good core, the divine core that's always there. My dearest friends, I want to thank you so much for being here with us today. This beautiful crowd that's here, and again, thank the Arch and Base, Reb Shmuel, Reb Moshe, Reb Aaron, and all of the hundreds and hundreds of people who have gathered here today from South Africa or other parts of the world. And I want to bless all of you and all of us that we should be able to take this gathering, this get-together, and this week in which all the Jewish people are united in grief, united in pain. We are all reeling. We all feel how much we don't understand and we don't know, but we want to be together. To use this week as a powerful opportunity to really help us grow into a new space, to get out of our stuckness, whatever that stuckness looks like. Every one of us, I know with myself, I have certain things that keep me stuck. They keep me stuck in old paradigms. They keep me stuck in old mentalities. They keep me stuck in old habits and patterns. Let's use this moment to emancipate ourselves, to go out of our comfort zones, and to open ourselves up to the truth of who we really are. Ambassadors of infinity in this world. Ambassadors of love, light, hope, and healing. Ambassadors to bring redemption to a world. May we experience it speedily in our days. B'karev b'yameinu, amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Jacobson, as always. What can I say? Kind, sensitive, loving.
Thank you. Tell my mother-in-law. Take another few questions. Hi, a lot of questions today. Let's do another few questions here. I'm so privileged to speak to all of you in South Africa and all of you from all over the world where you're gathered. So many Jews are gathered. I see in South Africa they have close to 1,000 people. And the truth is, if it's couples watching, I don't even know how many people. 800 people, 1,000 people. Ken Yerbu. And so many who are here on the yeshiva.net or wherever you're joining us from. It's a privilege to be here with all of you, and thank you for sharing so much and so candid. Okay, let's take another few questions. It's important to take note that the thousands of Jews at Meron came from every possible group of Jews. Zionists, anti-Zionists, Hasidim, Litvish, Yeshivish, young, old, religious, not religious, every group, including the groups fighting each other to form governments in the land of Israel. All these Jews were all united in life at Meron with a common cause, the Yahrzeit of Reb Shimon ben Yochai. Then in an instant they were united in death. What is the secret of Reb Shimon ben Yochai? Great question. And the answer is Reb Shimon ben Yochai revealed what's called Pnimiyus HaTorah, the inner core of Torah. And because he revealed the inner core of Torah, he also revealed the inner core of the Jew. And whenever you reveal the inner core of the Jew, you immediately see that we are all one despite our differences. Next question. Imagine if there was ever a time that all was good for the Jewish people. Maybe in the desert with the manna, maybe certain times of King Solomon's rule. Did people have faith then? When they saw miracles every single day? Of course they had faith. Why not? Everything is good. Now we have crisis after crisis. Now our faith is being tested. There's no big test of faith when all is good. It's this generation's faith that trumps every other generation of Jews in terms of their faith. Yes, the generation of Jews, especially before us, that went through the Holocaust and everything they have been through, and they came out wanting to be Jews, even the secular Jews. They want to be Jewish. The worst insult you could tell them is, you're not so Jewish. They want to be Jewish. They want to identify with the Jewish people. They rebuild Jewish communities, each in their own way. It's incredible. It's just incredible. I think we need unity not just between Jewish people, but also the entire world needs to be united. God created everybody, everything, and everyone, Jews and non-Jews alike. Absolutely. Unity always begins with yourself. It travels to your family, it travels to your community, it travels to your nation, and then it travels to the whole world. And you know what? The more you love yourself, the more you could love your family, the more you could love your community, the more you could love other people, the more you could love strangers. It's never a contradiction. The more Jews are unified with each other, the more we're unified with the whole world. That unity spreads. The prophet Isaiah says in chapter 11, when Mashiach comes, the wolf shall lie with the lamb. V'gar ze'ev im keves. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe once said at a Pesach Fabringen, I think it was 61, Tavshin Chaf Aleph, he said, how is that going to happen? Because we're going to learn to make peace between the wolf and the lamb in our own hearts, in our own souls. And when the wolf and the lamb inside of me learn to coexist with peace, without judgment, by osmosis, that's going to travel to the whole world. And in the zoo and in the jungles, the wolf will lie with the lamb. Incredible insight. I'm sorry to be technical, and you may call me a cold Litvak, and pardon me if I'm being improper. Is it not right? Isn't it not right to make a Shiva call the first 3 days of Shiva, especially before the burial? And also, isn't the immediate family exempt from positive mitzvahs before the burial? It's called an oinen. Why did you visit? Why did he daven Ma'ariv? Okay, great question. And the answer is that my visit was not a Shiva call. They, of course, weren't sitting Shiva. It was before the burial. I went to eat the third meal of Shabbos with the family. It was not a Shiva call. I went with my wife, and we spent the third meal of Shabbos with this family. In terms of being exempt from Ma'ariv and all the mitzvahs, so there is a big debate among the halachic authorities. Some say that when the responsibilities for burial are being taken care of by the Chevra Kadisha, by an organization that's dealing with it, so then the person is either obligated or at least permitted to do all of the mitzvahs and say a blessing and so forth. if one looks up Nite Gavriel by Rabbi Gavriel Zinner Shlita and Hilchas Avelus, he compiles all of the different views and perspectives. So there's certainly halachic perspectives that support the behavior of this father. The fact is, next question, some people lose their faith in God. Talk about the Holocaust. Many people lost their faith. Others didn't. Probably others got stronger. What is it in the person or the event or the experience that makes some people hold on to their faith and some people just can't hold on to their faith? That's a very good question. I don't know that I don't know the answer. You want to know what's that gene that some people, they see a crisis and they become stronger, or at least they maintain their faith and others just lose it? It's a great question. There were Jews that came out of the Holocaust much stronger, or at least many Jews who held on to their faith and others who just gave it all up. It's a great, great question. It's a very powerful question. I'm not sure I know. I can assume and speculate, but without any real authority, that probably has a lot to do with the education of this person, the upbringing of the person, the examples they saw by their parents in their youth. I'm sure it also has to do with how they perceived God and religion and faith before the Holocaust. There's a letter from the Rebbe to Eli Wiesel, 1965, and he writes to him that the questions that were generated by the Holocaust, the theological questions, are not new to the Holocaust. Jews have suffered terribly for thousands of years. So how did the thinking Jew make peace with God in 1937 or 1927? How can he make peace with God if he learned about the destruction of the Second Temple and the Crusades and the autodafés and the pogroms and the expulsions and the Khmelnytsky pogroms? And even forget the big events, even the small tragedies. Small, quote unquote. How did he make peace with God then? Well, you say it wasn't 6 million. But if God is just, God is real, God is kind, even taking one life that is innocent seems cruel. If somebody tells you, oh, I'm a good guy, I won't kill 6 million people, I'll just kill 10 people. It's the same evil. If you could take one innocent life, is there a difference between 1 and 10 and 100? I mean, of course, there's a difference in quantity, but one innocent life has absolute infinite value. So the Rebbe writes to him, the theological questions of the Holocaust existed before the Holocaust. So how did the Jew really respond to them then? So that's really the question. I think a lot of it has to do with how a Jew saw Yiddishkeit before the Holocaust. And we often have to ask ourselves this question. Am I using a tragedy as an excuse to run away from my deepest calling, run away from my deepest self, or not? So that's a profound question people have to ask themselves. A Philippine submarine recently sank. It killed all 50 crew members on board. A video surfaced that as the oxygen depleted and they knew their end was near, they sang. Yeah. Listen, sometimes the greatest, it's sad, it's so sad to say, the greatest nobility of the human spirit comes out in such situations. You know, they say that when the Titanic was going down in April 1912? When the Titanic was going down, it was a few days after Pesach. I think the 28th of Nisan. The Titanic was going down, and the musicians kept on playing the music. They kept on playing the music till the last moment. The music went on. It's very, very powerful. It's special people. You said words are containers, they limit reality, but God used words, not thoughts, to create the world. Excellent. That's what we always learn in Likkutei Torah, that our world is a world of finiteness, because God used words. And that allows for the perception of finiteness. And we always have to choose to align the posture of the universe with its original source, which is divine thought, which is infinite. So at every moment I can choose to trace the words back to thoughts and never get stuck in definitions and labels, which practically means that no trauma defines you. So even if you find yourself by nature to be obsessive or stubborn, and you climb up on a tree and you don't know how to get off, you don't allow your fear and stubbornness to keep you stuck and paralyzed. You're emancipated because no label should define you and label you. You're always rooted in a space of infinity. And therefore, you can transcend your stubbornness and you can come out of the tree and you could treat your spouse the way you're supposed to treat your spouse. And you can let go of the things you have to let go and you could start a new life. That's because we're never stuck in words. Great question. That commentary of the Vilna Gaon was very powerful. But how would any of us understand what God meant when he told the angels, I'm going to destroy the world, without the commentary of the Vilna Gaon? It makes me think how much we probably don't understand in Torah without the commentary of our sages. And maybe instead of thinking that the events are negative, we should believe that God really knows what he's doing, and the reasons are not sinister. They're not negative. He's not trying to act against us. He actually loves us at every single moment. And we should get rid of the idea of God as being a sinister God. Yes, you speak well. You speak wise words, but it's painful. It's hard. It's just hard. We have to acknowledge that sometimes things are so hard. It's very hard to go into a new paradigm and to say goodbye to all of my old paradigms. So this is the work that we have to do. My dearest brothers and sisters, I send love to all of you. Everyone in South Africa, everyone in the whole world, wherever you are joining us. We have a very large crowd. God bless you. Let us remain focused, energized, inspired, invigorated, empowered. Show up to God with our full geula posture, with our full redemptive presence, saying, I do not want to have any cords that connect me to my inner exile, to my inner mentality that holds me down and keeps me trapped. I want to tell God, I am in a space of redemption. And now you bring in that space into our lives so that our geula and his geula fuse and the world is redeemed. Thank you. Have a beautiful day and a meaningful day. Thank you for joining us.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.